Hello everyone and welcome to my channel where I've been playing Cities Skylines II. This is the long anticipated follow-up to the much loved city building game that was released back in 2015, developed by Colossal Order and published by Paradox Interactive, a game that I've had more than a little experience with over the last few years. Anyway, the sequel is finally here and it's safe to say it's had a bit of a mixed reception. It's currently being review bombed on Steam by people who seem to be mainly complaining about performance issues, but is the game really that bad? What's it actually like to play? Well, here are my first impressions after just under a week with the game. First, the visuals. This is one of the major upgrades to CS2 over its predecessor, and it is a beautiful game. Now, I'm running it on medium settings so I don't melt my graphics card, but it still looks gorgeous, particularly with the weather effects, day-night cycle and the transition from summer to autumn. It's so much more realistic than CS1, which has its drawbacks as well as its advantages, more on that in a minute. But overall, I think the game just looks amazing. On to the gameplay, and I'm not going to lie, I have struggled a bit with several elements of the game. I built 2 cities now, getting them both to a reasonable size, but I just cannot get them to make a profit. I'm sure I'll get better at this as I learn the mechanics of the game, which are very different from CS1, and working out how to play is part of the fun of this kind of game. I also haven't really had my progress blocked so far, but it is a little frustrating. Perhaps I'm just used to CS1 where it felt like it was much easier to keep your city in the black. I am also struggling a bit with the terraforming. Now, of course, you do have to terraform the landscape properly to get your city to look good, but for some reason, perhaps due to the larger scale or the more realistic graphics, this feels more challenging in CS2. Even with contour lines, the landscape can be deceptive and it can be difficult to see just how hilly it is until you build a row of houses and see their wonky gardens. Some old frustrations from vanilla CS1 also return. It's still difficult to get a pedestrian bridge over a highway to be level, but I'm sure there will soon be mods that allow us to fix these kinds of issues. Speaking of mods, the game has launched without a mod store or an in-game asset editor, but I'm not concerned. These things will get added to the game in time, and I'm sure the community will do great things with them once they are released. For now, I think it's good for us to get a proper play with the vanilla features and learn how this new iteration of the game works. On the positive side, there is a lot to like. The road tools in particular are much more flexible, allowing you to do all kinds of crazy things you couldn't even do with mods in the original game. I love that you can add grass, trees, bus lanes and trams to existing roads without scrolling through 1,000 different flavours of road types. I love that you could just plop roundabouts down and it sorts everything out for you, and the fact that cars actually seem to understand how roundabouts are supposed to work now. There are also extra tools for drawing grids, junctions and crossings get created automatically. There's just so many ways to make it easier to lay out the roads and paths in your city. I also love the new progression system where you get development points to unlock items in a tree instead of just getting loads of new stuff dumped on you whenever you reach a new milestone. It really helps with the game's pacing and gives you a greater feeling of control over how your city develops. I also like the more realistic proportions of the buildings, even though this is something of a double-edged sword. I always struggle to leave enough space in my city to add certain service buildings, and it's now even more of an issue because the things are so bloody massive, but again, this is something that I'm sure I will get used to in time. Overall, I'm definitely enjoying it. I can't say I'm not looking forward to some of my favourite mods from the first game being recreated in this new engine, but it's definitely a promising start. And now on to the performance issues. I'm playing on a middling PC, which used to be fairly high spec, but hasn't really had many upgrades in the last few years. My specs are on screen now for anyone who's interested, and according to the Steam FPS counter, I'm getting 25 to 30 FPS on medium settings at 1080p most of the time, which is fine for me. Sometimes it dips as low as 10 FPS when I'm zooming in and out and moving around the city a lot, and my cooling fans are working overtime, which I haven't really noticed in many other games, but it's been stable for hours at a time and I haven't had any major bugs or crashes yet. It's certainly not the broken and unplayable mess that some people would have you believe. I would also point out that the developers did admit that there would be performance issues before release and they decided not to delay the game, and I respect them for that. There has also already been one performance patch and I'm sure more will soon follow. It is a brand new game that's very detailed and pretty, and I didn't expect to be able to run it at 60 FPS on full settings without an upgrade. Also, I should point out that this isn't Street Fighter or Call of Duty. It doesn't need to run at 60 FPS because it's not a game for twitchy, overstimulated caffeine addicts with no attention span, but I digress. There's a couple of other things I wanted to say before I move on. Firstly, it's very unfair to compare CS2 at launch to CS1 after 8 years of patches, updates, DLCs and content creator packs, not to mention all the mods and community assets. Let's not forget that CS1 had its own fairly rocky launch and only developed into the game we know and love after years of TLC from the developers and input from the community. Secondly, on that note, I know that Colossal Order has a great track record for post-launch support, so I have every confidence the game will continue to improve over the coming weeks, months and years. I strongly suspect that most of the issues and concerns people have right now will be addressed one way or another pretty soon. Concluding thoughts then, well, it's an admittedly shaky start for Cities Skylines II, but I think a promising one. I'm certainly going to keep playing it, learning how to get the most out of it. I might even make some more videos and share my experience and any tips I learn as I go on. While the launch may not have been perfect, and while I might not necessarily recommend the game to everyone, particularly people with older hardware in its current state, I am enjoying it and I am optimistic about the game's future. I cannot wait to see how it evolves in the hands of both the developers and the community over the coming years. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more Cities Skylines and other nerdy content, and I'll see you in the next video.